So, let's start for today. Today we are going to play some 6-handed super turbos on 888poker, and they are the sit and go format that runs the most. And I think in these kind of games the structure is a bit different than in any other sites that I have seen. It's pretty close to a PokerStars structure, but there is no antes in game. So if we are looking at the lobby here, and there are two differences. First of all, there are no antes in these games. So no antes, no time bank, and the prize pool is divided 70-30 instead of the more common 65-35. So it's going to need some adjustment if you are used to the sit and go structures on other sites, and also the players are requiring some adjustment. And in these kind of games, when we are starting about 25 BBs deep, it usually means that we are not having enough stack depth to open big. So we are pretty much just min raising through the tournament. There are some points, and now I even didn't find enough time to register, and I think in the top right, King 10 is about the edge that I might open there. And I don't believe that my opponent is having a queen here. The limp call is kinda nasty, and it's also kinda nasty when he carries on betting small. And for 3 barrels, I think that there are some flush draws. Actually, I think there are enough flush draws, and there are some queens. So now we gave the maximum value to a queen there, and that was a tight spot. I thought that there would be enough flush draws in his range, and that there shouldn't be that much what would hit well. And hello Ahille22, our new member. Welcome on board, and hope you are seeing the session. But as you can see in these 535s, I even lost registration to one game, and I think they are opening something like once every 2 minutes. So it should be quite easy for you to get your session going in these games. On 888poker, it's sometimes hard in sit and goes to get a decent session going. Money Please seems to have stolen a lot, so we are 3-betting him and 3-bet shoving, as we still should have enough chips to have decent fold equity against him. It might actually be that they are opening every minute. And now I noticed that I'm missing something here. I'm missing my HUD explanation. So just a moment. In there it's close between min raise calling and shoving. And something like ace-8 suited, I prefer shoving, but if we would have something like ace-jack suited, I would be min raise calling all day long. And in here I'm more trying to find out where I can abuse the opponents rather than playing Nash or something. Like, if our opponents are having plenty of leaks, I don't think it's no use, or I think it's no use trying to play Nash and trying to play unexploitable when you can make more money by exploiting your opponent to the maximum. And that's great that you have seen our videos on 50/50s on YouTube and registered. That's always great. And good evening to Freddy and good evening to Neo. And for Shakal, I'm already on. And I wasn't quick enough. That would have been a call. And as you can see, no time bank makes things hard sometimes, especially if you're trying to explain something. And yeah, Ahille, I just... In here actually I should have c-bet the flop, so... Now I made two mistakes. Two mistakes for something that should have been pretty simple. I think we have no fold equity against Chris, and we are not in that good shape against a typical nits range here, so just need to fold there. And that's the bad thing when you are getting hurried, so you are making bad decisions. And in here I actually could have also raised smaller to hide my stack size a bit. And here when an opponent limps, the king-queen will be... I will be shoving king-queen all day long. And as you can see there, one of the awesome stuff in 888 poker is that you are having the huge piles of money when you get to heads up. And when someone limped, the big blind had kings, so... Well... Things aren't going always well, but we'll see. They should be going better in the future. In here, if I'm thinking I'm against a random that wouldn't be calling perfectly against me, I'm going to be shoving pretty much any two. But against a player that would be calling perfectly, I think even 5-4 might be off limits. And if I'm doing something stupid that I know exactly when I have done something stupid, I'm trying to explain it, so I'm by no means perfect, but... And in some cases it's more like do as I'm saying and not as I'm doing. And right now when we are playing 4 games, we are playing every other game that opens. And we'll see if we are starting to... We'll see if we are starting to find out some of the regular players here and how they are playing. In here, even though the guy looks pretty needy, if he shoves, I'm going to be calling all day long. Even though this hits the opponent's range, it will hit my range as well, so... And I think these general opponents, if opponents are needy, the general opponent that is needy will be needy also after, or will be needy post-flop likely as well, so I think that I'm going to get these guys that are playing slightly needy, I'm going to get these guys to fold more often. In here, because opponent is calling a lot, we are going to be shoving this. It will be plus EV no matter what the Hesles is calling. And if someone can help Shakal to see the stream, it would be great. And in here the Money Please seems to be a player that knows what he's doing. And against a player like that, when he shoves for 5 big blinds, I think we need to go all in with King Jack off. But we'll see. I think the opponent's range should be really wide in this kind of situation. With so little of stack size to to be left. And for the stats, I think that in general my stats will vary a lot on depending on what kind of players there will be in the table. If the players in the table are going to be loose callers and they are going to be calling a lot, then my stats will be pretty tight. But if the opponents behind me are looking needy, then I will be really aggressive. And Ahille, with King Jack off, it's a marginal call. Yeah, I agree that it's a marginal call, but I still think it's a plus EV call if it doesn't seem that opponent will be overly needy. In here, I don't believe that our opponent would have only 8s here. There will be plenty of flush draws, etc. And 10s will be a great call against the range that the general opponent will have here. And unfortunately, our opponent rivered an ace. Oh well. These things happen. And actually, I need to talk to you about the 888 Poker's new promotion that you can read on our forums, the Live to Dream. So every day on 888 Poker you can now win. And actually I'm going back to the promotion later on because there's going to be an interesting situation on the bottom left corner. On PokerStars, if I'm getting that short stacked, I'm going pretty much with any 2 cards because the antes are going to grind me up pretty soon. But on 888 Poker, when there are no antes, it makes a lot more sense to use the space you are having and try to get the better hand to go all in, because it doesn't cost you anything to wait. So that's something that you need to be taking into account. Like on PokerStars, the antes are going to be high antes all the time. So you need to take those into account. And on 888 Poker, no antes, it means that you need to adjust in those situations. And Shakal, that's a bit worrying that the stream worked for 5 seconds, then broke up and didn't start again, even at my other PC. I'm a bit unsure. We are having quite a few viewers compared to what's normal. So if there are other people that are having problems, I'm hoping that you are going to be telling to me about them so that we can do something about it. And you can see on the Super Turbos, because these games are so quick, that we have now been doing, what, 15 minutes, and after 15 minutes we have already lost like 7 tournaments in a row without cashing in any. So, and in here, if I'm thinking that my opponent is just is a recreational player that is only looking at their own cards, I'm going to be betting a lot of those paired boards, because I'm thinking that if our opponent is looking at only at their own cards and not what their hand's relative value is, they are going to be folding a ton in tables they are not hitting that often. But against a regular player, they will be playing back because they are also knowing that, aha, if I can't hit that board, it's quite likely that you didn't hit that board either. So it might get quite deep at some spots. But let's get back to the promo. So on 888 Poker, every day there is 2 Live to Dream packets, so there are $5,000 free rolls, and if you have deposited to 888poker ever, you are getting 2 free tickets, and for every $5 sit and go or higher, you are getting 4 more tickets to the free rolls. And on the free rolls there is one main prize. That's going to be the $2,500 Live to Dream package. It can be anything from a skydiving course to a Formula 1 experience. And there are also $2,500 of money for grabs as well, so it's not just the Dream package that there is one player that wins it, or 2 players, because there's 2 tournaments every day. But I think that's an interesting promo. And it doesn't take, for a sit and go player, it's a really good promo because it doesn't take a lot that you can take part in it. And as I said, that those tourneys, they are limited to 8,000 players, and I think that you need to be quite quick in registering to those, because all the tourneys I have seen have been 8,000 players already, so when you got the tickets you need to use them quick, and you need to know when to use them. Like, I think right now you should probably be registering for the tomorrow's game if you want to play tomorrow. And 888poker is one of PokerImania's partner sites, so you can support PokerImania so that we can get you even more material in the future. And also you can then take part in our exclusive promos. We have been giving away on 888poker, I think, at least a six-pack of private coachings already. And we will be carrying that on in the future. In here I think that with the dues I'm having some equity, and when the opponent just min bets, I think I'm going to get even more equity. And in here, nines is an easy call. And if the opponent would have been with a bigger stack, that could be a solve, but with such a crappy hand and opponent having just 4 big blinds, I think in that spot the opponent start to call pretty wide as well. And if you have any questions or comments or anything, please just ask during the coaching session. I'm trying to get those comments when it's going to be easier for me on the tables to take those. And there has been a lot of great hand analysis on sit and goes on our hand analysis forum. And that is something that I probably shouldn't have c-bet, but if I'm getting sit out, then it's going to be pretty horrible for me as well. I don't believe that my opponent will have an ace because he didn't bet the flop, and on the turn, when a queen hits, that's actually really, really, really nasty. I'm having a bluff catcher, but that's pretty much also the problem, that when I'm having a bluff catcher and I'm beating a bluff and opponent bets twice with a large sizing, it's pretty hard for me to be calling there also with the ICM implications in place. I'm going to try to induce this guy to raise, and when he raises, I don't think that he will be folding that much. it's interesting to see this G. Davies to be limp calling with Jack 10 suited, and that's like the perfect hand against my exact hand that I just had. If opponent checks behind me, I'm going to bet the turn, and it helps to get the queen, but I would have bet once either way. And now we are hoping that we are going to hit the moneys the first time. It looks pretty promising. And in here, we are going to be waiting for better cards. Because if our opponent is going to be calling us a lot or 3-betting us a ton, it just isn't plus EV for us to be playing wide range of hands. In here, opponent has been raising a lot, but still with that stack size, I don't think that. And now I'm trying to induce this data to be shoving with the kings. But in these kind of situations, if we are going to have an opponent that's and in here, I still think that we are going to have the best hand and we are going to get value from a queen. And we would have probably gotten value from a queen, but from 10 queen, we are not getting value, we are giving value. Oh well, on to the next tourney. Playing sit and goes is sometimes pretty horrible when you just can't win a single flip. So in these situations, I think that it has been a pretty horrible session thus far. But it shall be better. When he bets a full pot here, I don't think that we can bluff him out of his hand that often. Pretty nasty. I think like practically everything that opponent would be defending is ahead of our range right now. Like something like King 10 is the only hand that our opponent can have that isn't better than us on that board run out. So, and when he shoves, it's an easy decision then. And that 10-8 suited would actually... It's pretty close, but it's probably a Nash call. And in these kind of situations, when you are running really bad, the most important thing is to stay calm and try to get your A game going. For example, you can... It might sound stupid, at least for a man that doesn't do yoga or anything, but getting a better position in your chair and having deep breaths will make you more focused for the games and will make you... I'd say also that it will make you feel a bit better. So that's something that I'm recommending for most players. And in here, if we wouldn't have hit the queen and the queen is like the second pair, I'm going to be calling a lot here and not doing the raising. And so I'm trying to not to be isolated against only the better hands in here. And now it kinda sucks when our opponent is sitting out. And of course, if we would have any bluff hand, we of course would have bet here. But I think it's really hard to get value there, and it's likely that our opponent wouldn't have hit. Actually, on the river, it's just a hard spot because the opponent checks twice because of sitting out and not because it was his own choice. So, and in here, even though we have only a gut shot, the gut shot is still profitable because it will be a not gut shot and the opponent bet just 1/6 of the pot. So, and we are likely to get more value on the river if the gut shot will be hitting. Actually, the Achilles that T4 suited is a Nash push for sure. But just before the T4 suited, I had the King 10-8 off that I folded. So there was two 10-high hands in a row in the heads-up session. In here, first I looked that I'm against just the small blind, and if I would have been against just a small blind, I would have bet here after he checks, even though I have exactly nothing. But when it's a four-way pot, I think I'm never going to win it by betting there, so... And now it's a bit more nasty. I think that for the previous hand against Lawrence, we would have probably gotten pretty good value out of it if he wouldn't be sitting out, so can't even luckbox that. If opponent hasn't done anything yet, I'm trying to check if the opponent is playing really tight, so I'm trying to see how the opponents are reacting at the start of the game. And Neo said that you have a general question about, and when Lawrence has been calling so much, even though this is, we are risking a huge stack in here and we are against two smaller stacks, I think against his calling range this will be a really good shove. I think in here that we are going to have the better hand often enough, and our opponent called us pre-flop without position with 8-4 off. Which is quite quickly turning him into a player that I want to play more against. Another day, another flip. But in here we are heads up against an interesting opponent that has limped a ton pre-flop, but then been playing really aggressive post-flop, so if our stack sizes would be a bit higher, this would be an interesting spot. And in here, this will be a plus EV shove, and our opponent has been playing really aggressive with his biggest stack, so we are not giving him the opportunity to aggro us out, and he wakes up with ace-king. Can't do much about that. And there was a question on Neo about calling all-ins. It seems that in hyper/super turbos that is more important. How do you know what to call? Do you have a standard range or orientation points? I have some standard points. So it's more about calculating a ton of situations open, and when you have calculated a ton of those spots open, then you are starting to have a pretty good idea what would be the optimal range to call in most situations. And also you need to be taking into account like how wide is the opponent shoving, and when you are checking a hand you should be checking like, if this would be against a too loose pusher, what would I do? If this would be against a too tight of a player, what would I do? So also when you are analyzing, when you are putting yourself through different scenarios, it will make it easier to learn decent ranges. But I don't think that we need to call Nash when we play against regulars. It will be a good starting point, but you will see and you will learn that there will be a lot of opponents that are regulars but aren't playing Nash. And when they aren't playing Nash, then you need to be adjusting to what they are playing. Some regulars I'm going to be calling wide, and in here, as I said, that it seems like we can't just win a flip. I'd say it's continuing on from that. But no need to complain. Just trying to carry on playing and hopefully to play better. And like usually I never play tight in heads up, but I think against this opponent there is not that much. Like, we have had quite horrible hands, to be quite frank, and then we are also having an opponent that is likely going to be calling too much. So sometimes it just, the card run is not good enough for you to abuse a certain type of opponent. In here, when this opponent just limped, I think it made it a really good spot for me to be shoving, because this guy is likely to have a weak range. But now he limps an ace-king, and I don't even make a note about it, because this guy has thus far played, I think, 7 hands. And all of those hands that he has played, he has limped. So even though if I know that he's limping ace-king, he will be limping like practically anything. So it's really hard if the guy is really having a linear limp range that includes all the better hands as well. So, or it doesn't make it necessarily harder. It just makes that we are taking it into account that he might have a decent hand and not just the crappier sort of hands. And practically the ace is one of the better cards that we can hit there. With just a gut shot, I'm not going for it. But if this would have been an 8 or a 9 that we would have a double gut shot, I would have been calling these air clouds c-bet. Because I think then it will be quite likely that... And in here, I think that in any way we need to be checking and shoving the flop, because then we are going to get even some fold equity. But I don't think that we can, with those kind of stack depth, that we are going to be able to fold that, even though it's a crappy hand. Now, as you saw, we had only 1.5 big blinds left, and it will be quite likely that we are never getting our opponent to fold if we are shoving it against him pre-flop. But when we are going to the flop and shoving the flop, we are getting folds from our opponents. And that's what increases our equity in that spot hugely. And to get back to Neo, that it's not only that you need to be calling well in super turbos or hyper turbos. It's just in super turbos and hyper turbos, there are more opponents that are going to be shoving wide against you. And when the opponents are shoving wide against you, so when the opponents are shoving wide against you, then you need to be calling wide, and that seems to look like that it's going to be more important in hypers or in turbos. But calling correctly in the push fold stage is going to be as important in turbos or normal speeds as in hypers. When you are, but it will be just that the correct ranges are different in hypers and in turbos, because I think on hypers players are generally way more aggressive with their shoves, and so you need to be more aggressive with the calls. And also, the higher up you go in games, the more important calling is, because if you are not calling correctly, it probably doesn't matter that much in, if you are talking about, for example, in these $5 games that have like no regs in 888 poker. It doesn't matter if you are calling completely correctly or not, because these opponents aren't going to abuse you. But if you are giving your chips away easily, let's say in a $30 or $60 game on PokerStars, the opponents, the regs, they are going to adjust to that. And when they are adjusting to that, then they are getting your chips. And they are getting your chips pretty easily, and then you are getting abused a lot. So the higher up you go, and the more opponents are adjusting to you as well, the more it's going to be, the more important the calling will be. Like, the better your opponents are at adjusting, the more important calling will be. And now, yeah, it was a huge mistake on his part to not call me on there, but if I would have shoved, I would have denied my opponent the opportunity to make that huge mistake. So it's not only utilizing the huge mistakes, it's also giving opportunities for your opponents to make those huge mistakes. And now I'm actually hating it, because the opponent can't hit a lot, but flush draw is one of those hands that will be in the opponent's range. And I'm a bit unsure here. If my opponent is drawing, like, if my opponent's drawing, he's hitting, and if he's... That's an interesting hand after all. Like, what am I beating there is not a lot. So I'm going to be bluffing, but what my opponent is going to be folding on the river that he's not going to be folding before that. I don't know, do I like my river bet or not? Not in there. On the Queen 9. Probably would have been better to second barrel on the turn and then with a plan to give up on the river. So I think that wasn't that well played. And I think at least on PokerStars I have seen a lot of regs even at the lowest limits. And when I did the $50 to 5k challenge, I saw a good player in the 50 cent 90-mans final tables, which was kind of hilarious that I had played against this opponent at I think $15 games before, and then I saw the opponent in a 50 cent. Like I saw a decent regular at the 50 cent game, and it wasn't one time. I think I played against him like during all of the days I played at the 50 cent games. So there might be some regs even at the lowest stakes. And if you are getting 40% ROI, that's going to be really good in the long run as well. But I don't believe that in these hypers, even though if your opponents are completely out of their minds, if the rake is 10%, I don't think that you are, in the long run, your edge can be much higher than 10%. So, but on 888 poker, these games are pretty soft. These games are going to be pretty soft even at the higher stakes. I have played a lot of $20 games and $10, $20 and $40 games. And I like it because these games are... Actually, this could have been a shove as well. It's pretty close because I think this opponent is quite likely to be calling stupid more than... So in this kind of situation, even though there would be ICM pressure that I could apply, I don't believe that this opponent will know anything about ICM, so there is very little pressure I can apply on him. And yeah, like Kauris, I completely wholeheartedly agree that the games are really easy. But I think the problem or what I said, that even in those games there might be one reg. So you can't just say that there is no regs at the lowest limits, and it might be. People's life situation change, and to have fun with poker, you don't need to play the highest stakes. And also, I think that you can have fun with the cent games, and you can also be trying new stuff more easily when you are playing. This is a nasty situation if I know ICM, he doesn't know, and he knows I know, or will apply a lot of pressure on me. And then I have had my half-decent hands on the big blind. When I can't call him with the half-decent hand, I would need a decent hand. And when I have had the crappy hands, then this guy has been on the big blind, and I couldn't have shoved that much of those. And Neo, I think it depends on A 350s with a guy who has 30% ROI and Shark Scope skill of 79. Probably some of the best stats I have ever seen. I think on those situations in sit and goes, you are most likely seeing a player that plays 180 man sit and goes. And we are still searching for the first win in these games. When we hit the 7, and I think that was the opponent had been slightly reggy before and played, I think, on 3 or 4 tables at the same time with me. This air cloud guy. So I think that this air cloud guy is likely to be a reg, and it's also more likely that he knows that I will not be able to hit a lot on that board, and that's why I called him with the middle pair. And we are still searching for the first win. 46 minutes of games and we are still searching for the first win. And 5 big blind shove, that's actually really close. I know that I'm not ahead of my opponent here, but when this opponent is likely to be... Actually, I don't know, this might be that I'm too wide in here, because I'm thinking too much about the situation where there would be antes. We are having a really decent draw in the top right table. And this Lawrence guy was the guy that played really passive pre-flop, limped a ton and played really aggressive post-flop. So I will be probably calling him on the river, even though against this guy I'm afraid that he will have the 6 there. And Kauris says that he has seen 3 good regs in over 1000 games. I must say, this starts to get old pretty quickly. I can't even think how many times have we shoved something halfway decent and get called by a completely dominating pocket pair like kings or aces in that kind of situation. And Neo, I think that when you are playing 9 max games, you shouldn't be avoiding a single player. You just want to play against him less than you would be, but if the opponents are having that high of an ROIs, I think that 9 max games are probably not their strongest suit anyway. So, and I think that 9 max games, if there is just one reg, it can't be... I think that you will be able to beat at least one reg, no matter how good the one reg will be. But then it would be different if we are talking about 4 or 5 regs and you. Something like a 6 reg game, if there are really strong regs, will be pretty hard to beat in the long run. And in these games, you are going to be losing a ton of money if you are not winning. And what does that mean? That we are, with the 70-30 price pool structure, it means that we are winning over 3, or we are net winning over 3 buy-ins when we are getting the first place. But when we are getting the second place, we are net winning less than 1 buy-in. In here, even though this opponent looks really needy, with a pocket pair, I don't think that we should be folding there. And actually, opponent had something like... I thought my opponent would have been there with a shorter stack. That should have been a c-bet that I missed there completely. That should have been an open because this big blind is sitting out. Then I can open pretty wildly, and that would be a spot that we could get some extra equity on. We got lucky and we got to the heads up with the pretty short stack, so it will be interesting how it carries on. And now it looks really good, actually. I have done some research before on how having a really good player on our table would affect our equities going forward in the games, and I think, like, I'm trying to remember, but I think it's something like if we are having a 10% rate game or something like that is rate about 10%, if there will be a 10% player or a 10% winner in the same games in a 9-max game, I think it's around 3% that it affects your ROI. So, and your ROI, I mean that if you would play against just average players and, like, there would be no regs on the table. And if there's, like, on average there is 4 regs on the table, then your ROI that you would have just against the really bad players would be quite great. But if you are having really good players in the same tables, then it will affect your... This will be interesting, and I actually should have probably bet at least half a pot there. It would be easier then to get the money in. And there is like tons of draws and tons of combo draws that our opponent can have there. Actually, Aircloud hasn't been calling like at all, so we are going... And in here we are putting the money in because there are so many draws and so many combo draws that our opponent can hold. And that was the first win! Finally! And now I can say that, yeah, let's go. Let's play the next game. Now it's quite awesome when there are 2 players sitting out at one table with me. I'm being quite cautious when a player that has played only when it's only 12 hands, but this is the first limp. I'm usually pretty cautious at that point. And when I'm min-raising, I'm going to be calling Aircloud, but I'm going to be folding to these 2 guys. I just think that they're going to be too passive in general in that kind of situation, that it will be profitable for me to open really wide there. Even though his 3-bets, that seems pretty wide. But if we are thinking that there's only 13 opportunities, there is still a lot of variance in the numbers. On average, he looks to be a tight and aggressive reg, and he would be probably the most reggy player. Like the Money Please and Quarson are the players that are looking like players I might avoid in the future. But in general, all the other players that we have seen thus far in these games, I think have not impressed me at all, so... And as you can see that the stats for some players are like completely out of what they should be. That, for example, in here we are having 3 loose passive players in the table, so And you can have a raised pot and then it might... And yeah, that player is certainly a player I want to play against. If the player opens and then calls with King 5 suited. And let me remind you, this is not play money, this is real money, but in 888 poker you can see some, I'd say, pretty good games. And there are some adjustments that I have probably failed. I'm trying to explain the adjustments that I'm making for these games. And for example, and now I'm referring mainly to the light calls, and they were only because that was like the only other player that has stolen really widely in these games. And when that kind of player steals, then we are also required to call pretty wide. But in these games, I think in general people are playing so tight and passive that you are going to lose some money if you are going to be calling really wide or be calling Nash. You need to adjust the Nash and you need to adjust really decently. And as I said that I was having a weird flu, so I have tried to take a lot of flu medication, and now I'm having a lot of stuff to drink in here. Make it a bit easier to talk. And when we are playing 4 tables, I think that those are lasting on average about 12 minutes. So if we are playing 4 tables of these 6-handed super turbos, we are playing around 20 tables an hour. Nasty stack size because we are having a too large stack size for stop and go. We are having too few chips for shoving and making our opponent fold. So with something like King 5, there's like, it's not a value shove pre-flop, and it's like we are just checking to the flop and then we are evaluating the flop that do we have enough equity, and then we are either going for it or not, but it's not something that we can. And we couldn't have even stop and go because it was small blind against big blind, so necessarily we are not having even a chance to shove first. So technically, it's not even a chance to stop and go. And something I'm seeing also a lot at 888 poker, and in here I'm betting way bigger than normal because this Lorentz guy is in the pot with me, and I think that my bet size doesn't matter at all what he's going to be calling, and he's going to be calling, I think, pretty widely. And I think that we are, even though there is a king on the table, I just think that we need to be going for it, and that queen was one of the worst cards because it lessens the hands that we are winning, and it lessens them by a ton. So it was a situation that I liked, that if there would be just one overcard, but when there is 2 overcards, I just can't see that we are having enough hands that we would beat. In here with a straight, we hope that we are winning a big pot from our opponent. Unfortunately, no. In this situation, this is also a really nasty situation against this L-Lab guy. When he has, or when he or she has the really big stack, and when this guy shoves and this guy is with him, I'm going to need to be folding a lot more, and now we got quite lucky there. We would probably have been luckier if we would have hit the 9, so because then we both would have hit, but we would have hit a bit better, so we would have had a decent chance of getting a lot of value out of him or her. And a fun fact about Finnish language. In Finnish language and in Estonian there is no difference between the female and male, like him and her. There is not just him and her. There's a combined, so it's going to be a bit hard for me to explain some stuff in English because there is not a ready-made option, and it's easy in Finnish when I can just talk on another person without referring to the sex of the other person. And Shakal, I don't think that it's possible to automatically register to tourneys on 888 poker. And even the LLAP guy has been really tight or really loose passive player. But when we have a great hand like Ace Queen, we just need to be shoving it for value. In here we hit decently, and our plan will be to check call it. And that was probably like the 17th position to finish. But when the other check comes, then our hand strength improves. And when our hand strength improves... And this is a weird spot because we are set mining in a super turbo, which really rarely should happen. Because usually you don't have the stack depth to set mine. And in here we are just trying to put the decision point forward. So we are just trying to hide our stack size and trying to give our opponent the possibility to make a really big mistake post-flop. And I agree with you that on 888 poker it gets slightly annoying to... And with just less than 6 big blinds I can't fold a hand such as 6s, even against a random player in here. And as you can see in these games, most of my games is going to be playing with standard lines, standard situations, and really rarely there will be situations that the standard game, or let's say that we need to spice up the game. So I think for you to be able to beat the... And yes, there's the next win. I don't believe my opponent would have that often an 8 or a 7 there by limp calling, so I think my ace is going to be pretty high demand, so I'm calling there even though it looks a bit unconventional. But I think that because 888 poker is a bit harder to multi-table, I think that also makes it so good game quality wise. That when it's not that easy to multi-table, the regs are playing fewer tables, and that's why I don't like the word fish, but the fish to reg ratio is way better on 888 poker than on PokerStars, and I think that's one key reason. And I said on the beginning, even though there were a lot of discussion on that this is a really bad run, I just said that it's going to get better. And I know that I should be crushing these games, and sometimes it's also mentally hard for that exact reason. I think it's mentally harder to lose to a bad player, because when you get beat by a bad player, how good of a player can you be then? And that's also one reason I think that most of the players are making... If you are berating other players on your table, that if you are saying that you friggin' fish, that you don't know anything, and then you get beaten by the same guy, it will feel psychologically, it will feel horrible. But if you are respectful, like that guy, if you are a professional, those guys, they are your clients. And you shouldn't be berating them for one good reason to not berate your good customers is that if you want to make money, you want to have the recreational players to be able to have fun. And also, for a side note for that, so you are making more money and you will be happier while playing if you are trying to respect your opponent and trying to understand them instead of just complaining about how bad the players played at that certain spot. This is a horrible situation because the opponent limps and that flop hits really well on the opponent's general opponent limping range, so I can't be donk betting there. Top left, ace queen, post flop. Ace queen. Now I did a stupid call in here when I tried to just get it. I see bet it small. I think in there the difference is that I can't check call it because I'm in position. So my opponent can't do anything else, and I think that I'm going to make the opponent fold some of his equity there. And it's not that much fun if there is something like 10 or a jack or a king on the turn and the opponent bets. It's not that much fun to be calling that with ace high. And Neo1186 said that you play poker like Brazil plays football. I'd love to hear more about that comparison. Like, was it like just after the World Championships when Brazil lost? In here with Jack Queen against just like 7 big blind shove, we are going to be needing to go. And that's just like, that would be a really decent shove, and only because this guy, I think it's going to be better as min raise called these two and min raise fold to this goldfish. And Neo, no problem that you missed that I had position. It's always great to hear your comments because that's the best way to learn, by being here asking questions. Because if you are asking questions, then you are... And if you are concentrating on asking questions, you are going to be following the coaching more clearly. And I hope that then you are also focusing on the stuff. And as I said, I'm not perfect, but I'm a pretty decent winning player in the games I play. And I think there is a lot to learn in these coaching sessions when you can ask questions and ask more general questions and see also in game what happens in the mind of a winning poker player. But I think that pretty much every player that plays regularly will have stories about players that are... Actually, they might be pretty creative in how they are trying to insult you. But in these games, you will see that it's quite important, especially with the prize pool structure, that you would have decent starts for your heads ups. That the more chips you have when you are going to heads up, it's going to equal money, because there is going to be so much at stake when you are getting to the heads up phase of the game. And in this top left, I hope that we are getting a humongous stack before the heads up. And in here, I don't think in three-way pot it makes much sense other than to just check fold and be done with it. Nasty, nasty, nasty. I missed what my opponent called with eights, and now the same player calls me again. Let's just say that FML, that's something. That's really something. That same player gets a dominating pocket pair and after that gets aces in a row. So I'm already thinking about registering to the next game. So just when I said that how important it is to have a huge stack when you are going to heads up, and using the top left table as an example, it doesn't require a lot to jinx your run if you are believing in magical stuff happening. Actually in here, I thought that I can bet, but without position there's this Lorenz guy that has been playing pretty weirdly. I think that he's one of the players that we have played most against, and he plays pretty weirdly. Let's put it at that. And we got a really, really important walk by this two-pair tar. And when the guy gives us a walk, we can pretty much, with those stack sizes, we can pretty instantly say that I like to play against you in the future. And why it's important for him not to give me walks in that situation is that he's going to give chips to his worst enemy at the table. Like, if he gives chips to this Kid Pereira, it doesn't matter that much. He's going to be far ahead or he's going to be far ahead, but if he gives more chips to me, then I'm more ahead of him, and then I can apply way more pressure against him in the future. I hope this Kid Pereira now calls and we can get to the heads up. I should have shoved this, but I misclicked. Like, I was just not... Opponent limp, min 3 bets. How aces can aces look? I just can't fold it here because there are some other hands like ace. That's like a really weird way to play. So that was the note that I was writing about this JKN 109. That he limp min 3 bets about 7 BB deep, effectively ace king off. So that next time he's going to be limp min 3 betting, I know that he will be not just limp 3 betting the absolute nuts, that there will be some other hands as well. And I had totally lost that we had lost in the top right corner already. I'm unsure if shoving here would be okay if the opponent is not going to be calling enough. So I thought that I'm doing a really exploitable min raise fold against the really short stack in here. Actually, something like 280 would have been a better bet on the river. But we got some value out of king high! Great. This is more like, I think I can get this Guarson to fold. And against this Lawrence, he's going to be a complete wild card. But not this time. The Guarson had a hand there. Actually, I'm unsure that do I like my play there, because I'm only 10 BBs deep and these two opponents shouldn't be. So this is again something that's looks pretty stupid, like 10 BBs deep and the opponent is 13 big blinds deep and open from UTG and seems to be in his senses, so 3 should not be a shove, even when there is a bad player in the pot. And Neo1186, on the top left, do you think that was an any 2 spot? I think it's pretty close to an any 2 spot. If my opponent in the bottom left table would have been shoving Nash, that would have been a Nash call, I think. And we are having 2 heads-ups going on now, and we are having aces. Them aces on another. And we win! Queen 5. Close, but not against that guy. If he would have been a reg, that would be a snap call with Queen 5. But against a non-reggy player that has opened really few hands in heads up, I just can't be calling that. And king 3 suited will be strong enough for sure. So Neo, I think it's really close to the any 2 spot for the guy who gave me a walk. And boom! Again. And we went from a losing session to this being probably a winning session in just 2 games. And aces hold all the time. Yeah, and that's unfortunate that when aces are holding all the time, that we have seen our opponents holding them aces so much more often when they are in the pot with us. And we have just had those aces so few times thus far. At first I thought that this session would be more about showing all of the different types of 6-handed super turbos, but when I was not feeling that well, I thought that we can do it mainly on $5 games, and then we can also with the king 7 suited, we just need to go all in here. We have 2.5 big blinds left. No. Asset means aces in Finnish, and that's the name of the favorite hockey team of Kauris in the Finnish Elite Hockey League, and that's the nemesis of my favorite Finnish hockey team. So, even though I like aces, I don't like asset. Probably I need to start speaking only. Only English when talking about aces. When the opponent opened so big and the opponent has been so tight as an opener, I'm going to be shove it all in with queens, and I think that I'm going to get it all in with really decent equity there. I took some higher games. I think I'm going to be 6-tabling to the end. Opponent just limped, so there's 3-handed pot. It would make sense on big blind versus small blind to call there, but when it's a 3-way pot, it makes absolutely no sense to call the turn. And as Shakal says, I have to say I don't really see a difference between the $5 and the 11-cent game guys. I think that on $11 games there is no guy like Quarson on the table. Like, the good players are better when you are getting higher up in stakes. But the recreational players, the bad players, they are always going to be about at the same level. So I think that's the greatest difference. And in here we have seen some of the tight regs that I don't think that you will see in the 11-cent games. I must move one table out of the way. Because I need to show this to you. I think I have marked something like 5 regs in total while I have played. I think close to 1000 sit and goes on 888 poker. But I have found a reg in 888 poker. This Arbus 77 plays really solidly, and I think he's a decent reg, so take that. There are regs in 888 poker. They are just rare. But like the majority of the games, and this is really nasty because his range or her range for the Nancy should consist of really much of aces. And when he shoves the river, like overbet shoves, I think I need to have a top pair or better there. But I think it's a really weird spot to shove there. But like right now, I'm still looking at the Quarson guy. Actually, I could probably mark him as a reg already. Even though I have only 200 hands on him. It's usually easier to mark players that are far away from what I think would be profitable play in the games. You don't need that many hands on that, but on regs, you'll need to see if they are aggressive at the right places or at the wrong places. Nice against aces. Again. That was a table that was outside of the screen. That I'm now playing 6 tables that we will have interesting tables going on to the bitter end, or I don't like to say a bitter end, because this shouldn't be a bitter end. This should be a sweet end with something like 6 heads-ups and winning them all, and when the opponent just limps pre-flop, I discount a lot of aces out of his range, but probably I shouldn't have when he has an ace-6 suited. Well, it makes sense if you are thinking about it a bit. It probably makes sense for a player that likes to play half of his hands and only 11% aggressively, that there will be aces in his range, but he was so aggressive post-flop that I thought that there will be when he was so aggressive post-flop, I thought that there will be other hand than just aces that he will go broke with. But like this reggae kind of player, this Arbus 77, I think that's like watermelon in Russian or something. I think this guy was from Russia, yeah. So he's playing aggressively, he's stealing a lot, and usually he's also playing pretty aggressively against steals. so it's not easy just to grind him down. And if I remember it correctly, he also knows what he's doing at heads up, so in general he knows how to play this game. And in the top left corner we are flopping pretty well. Let's leave it at that our hand is quite good right now with the full house. But the problem is that it's really hard to get value out of other players on that kind of table. And the more there are players that are completely out of control, the more sense it makes to play really tight and not do anything stupid. And the more aggressive game is, the more you need to step your aggression as well. And also, the more there are needy players on your tables, the more you need to be stealing to play really well. And some of the regs here, I don't mind to have them on my tables when they are practically like folding all of their big blinds, so, and making it really easy for me to just take their chips. And then it doesn't matter if they are playing a lot, that if they are like regs per se, that they are regular players and I see them a lot in the tables. It doesn't matter that much. For a player, for me to be a reg, that usually means that the player should make my life hard at the tables. And standard call against a player with just three big blinds. And this is so standard fold because we can get in the money if the right player wins this. Now I wonder who is the right player to win this, but I hope we'll see it. And that's actually pretty right player when this Hugo guy won it. Because now this player is going to get all in, so we can get in the money pretty cheaply in here, hopefully. But no. Now we are a bit screwed, but not as screwed as we could be, because this guy is a big blind next, and there is a decent chance that he will screw it up. And he is going to screw it up. And he flops turns the straight flush, so I guess not. I think that was a slightly bad equity move for him, because I would be quicker all in the game. And so for him it would have made more sense, this Johan Sito guy, to fold the hand he had, the King 9. Let's see if I can still... What did I lose against? Check then. Oh well, these things happen. But for this player, when he's not the next guy all in, he can increase his equity by a lot by making me go all in first. It doesn't happen during the same orbit, but it will happen during the next orbit that I will be all in, and he will still have chips left after I'm going all in. But in these kind of situations also it depends a lot that should I go all in and what range should I go all in, because the more this Johan Sito is calling this Hugo boss, the more equity he's giving to me by playing badly, and then we'll need to take that into account as well. But that was an interesting situation for you to think about. That when I saw that my opponent made a bad call before on the bubble, then I can also think that he will probably make more of those bad calls, and then I'll need to adjust my own game to take those bad calls into account. And that's also one key thing. When I said to Neo1186 on one hand analysis that you should always give ranges for your opponents, what they are doing after you, because it affects what kind of equity you are going to have. So if I'm giving those guys ranges that they will collide more often, then it makes more sense for me to fold some of the situations that would be plus EV with Nash because of the increased amount of collisions in hand. And also it goes the other way around as well. If the guys are less likely to collide, I need to adjust the collisions, especially in the bubbles, if the bubbles are really meaningful bubbles. Because the guys will be colliding less and I will be receiving less of, I'd say, collision equity, or that would probably be a good word for it. So that's one charm of sit and goes, because also the players that are acting behind you are affecting your equity, and so there's a lot of things that you need to take into account with sit and goes. So I think that's pretty interesting to think about. It's pretty horrible. We have had just bad hands and our stack has dwindled. And as you have usually seen, that usually I'm not the passive kind of player. But sometimes when the cards and situations aren't going your way, you just need to be. Just like, you can't magically... You can't just magically always... You need to try to win every game, but if the card distribution goes really awry, there can be spots that there's practically like nothing you can do except watch your stack go away. But that may still be the correct play, that then you are just like choosing the... If all the options you are presented with are going to be losing options, then you need to pick the option that you lose least with. And I think that's about it for today. And for today we got a pretty horrible graph, and we played 1 hour and 40 minutes and we got 33 games, so the estimation that you'll get about 20 games an hour if you are playing 4 tables at once, I think it's pretty close. And so what you can see here, it probably wouldn't have required a lot of these number 2s becoming number 1, so this could be a profitable session. Like, actually now I know that I need to... If this would be the other way around, it would be easily a winning session, but there's variance in the games. So, and also there's variance in the situations. Today we got crushed by some situations with pair of kings, pair of aces, and we only got the blinds with our aces, so those are situations that matter. And actually we didn't even get to a winning situation. We got pretty close when we started winning, but then it started going the other way around as well. But let's think about what's going to happen on the next week. On the next week there will be Sunfest playing no limit cash games, I think on 888poker. That's also one of our partner sites. It's in the microgaming network, you should check it out. And it will be on Monday, tomorrow I think. Then there will be Kyberi playing Pot Limit Omaha on Wednesday. And next Saturday I'm going to be in Finland. So next Sunday there won't be a coaching session, and if there would have been more space on next week's calendar, I probably wouldn't have held this coaching session today. I would moved it to some better day, but when we need to go to Finland next week, it's a bit harder situation to move this coaching. But I hope you have enjoyed the coaching. I have enjoyed seeing new members in the chat, and now I think my schedule is pretty open because we have played, I think, every key structure that runs in 888poker. We have played on at least one poker night, so I think the next poker nights we will have will be outside 888poker. And we'll see. We'll see what will happen and what will be the next direction. Might be that we are going to iPoker at Coral Poker, which is also a partner site of ours, to see what kinds of games will there be on coral reefs. But thanks for everybody watching, and especially those guys that chatted. It's always nicer to hold these coachings when there is active chats and questions and comments. It also makes it a bit better because then I can also learn some spots myself, or when I have screwed something up. And I hope that you are also reading the English forum, because there have been great threads right now, great threads about goal setting, great strategy threads. So there is really good content on the English side right now, even outside these coaching sessions. And if you are ready to go to sleep, because tomorrow it's going to be Monday, and usually Monday is not a fun day, and you need a lot of sleep to survive the Mondays, then good night. And if you are still playing some poker, may this be the winningest night of them all. Good night.